lover of manatees. She is a lover of Disney, specifically Frozen, Olaf.
Beauty and the Beast, yep. My baby.
She is definitely, I think, the most passionate Disney fan that I have ever known in my entire life. And I think that really shines for the person that she is. She is definitely loving and caring and giving. And I think that that really shows in her everyday life and everything that she does. She is currently a teacher, but we actually met through a community service program that we served for 2 years, which then led her to teaching and working with little ones. So tell us more about yourself, Alicia.
Well, like you said, we met back in 2014 when we found City Year. I don't know about you, but it was something that was in my family, so I actually found it. I had found it through family. What about you? Did you stumble upon City Year?
In college, during undergrad, yes.
Okay, perfect. So, when it's going to be crazy when people say, we gave a year or 2 years for us. We came back for 2 years of service, but I know from both of our experiences, we were really passionate about working with children, really passionate about service, and it was through City Year that I actually found my passion for teaching, which is what I currently do. Right now, my profession, I teach 6th grade science, and I really do. I love science a lot. I love my students, who I constantly refer to as my children. And after being a teacher for 4 years, it actually really fueled me to want to be a mother, to become a parent. There was a point in time, I think, when we're all growing up, we're like, I don't want kids. I wouldn't be a good parent, but I feel like through teaching, I actually was like, you know what, I think I might be able to raise tiny humans and keep them alive. So I was really excited when I met my husband, who was also very passionate about being a parent as well.
So it sounds like the foundation of teaching really allowed you to open your eyes to saying, I can do this, I am capable, I have now experience working with the young children that I feel like I can now, have my own and raise my own.
Absolutely. So it was, when I met my husband, and you go through all those stages of like getting to know each other, we talked about the prospect of having children, and he was really excited about that prospect too. He, like me, is a huge Disney fan. He's a big kid at heart. I love him very much, and so he was definitely the man that I was like, I will raise my children with this man. So.
I think that's a great point that you bring up, that you were kind of at that stage, you had the communication with your husband, and you were kind of ready to move forward and to potentially have children. And so I think that leads us into the topic that we're going to be discussing today. We are going to be talking about a loss of a child, something very difficult, challenging, and something very vulnerable. I appreciate you, Alicia, so much for, willing to share your story with me. I honestly am so blessed and honored that you are willing to do this. And I think that it's really important and admirable and honorable that you are wanting to share your story, to communicate with others, to let them know that they are not alone. Many women actually experience this. We were talking just earlier, and it's 1 in 4 women. That is a huge number, and it's something that maybe not that many women know about prior to having kids, and maybe it's the first time they are hearing about this, or maybe their own story. And so what we're going to do is just kind of walk through Alicia's journey together, and so that we can inform and enlighten more individuals.
Absolutely. So, as Jennifer said, this is a statistic that not very many people really know or understand until sometimes you're in the heart of that journey. So 1 in 4 women, right now it's you, me. If we added 2 other women to the circle, one of us will have miscarried. And in this instance, it was me that miscarried. And I didn't realize the power of that number until I was pregnant at the same time with multiple friends. And now, I'm sitting here obviously talking to you after the loss of my child, while they are still, very pregnant and very close to the end of their journeys. And so I'm very happy for them, and I give them all the blessings and love. But it's definitely, it takes a toll. It takes a toll emotionally, mentally, and then as we talk through the process, even physically, the toll of losing a child it's a lot. So I guess we can start off at the beginning.
Yes, I would love that. If you could just kind of give us like a timeline of what happened and what occurred.
So my husband and I, we had gotten married in October, and I had been going to see a gynecologist for many, many years.
So last October 2019.
Yeah, so I had seen my gynecologist. I had kind of grown up with her, and so after we got married, we talked about how we were going to be moving forward health-wise to be able to start getting pregnant. So the first thing that I did was I went and saw a primary care doctor. I got a physical. I basically just wanted to make sure that my overall health of my body was good. So not just obviously the health from the gynecologist standpoint, but doing the blood work, doing the cholesterol, all that stuff. And so I had a primary care doctor. Everything was good. My doctor at the time, I was on a birth control method, for safety, and so we were getting myself off of that in a safe way, so that way my body could have some time to adapt without it, and then be ready to hold the baby when the time came. So,
sounded like you were taking all the precautions that you thought were necessary, not only going to a gynecologist, but your primary health care doctor, really taking thorough steps to make sure that you were ready and able and capable of bearing a healthy child.
So we gave it a couple of months to let everything, settle, and so we started trying. Right around February, we started trying. January, February-ish. So it was in March. It was spring break for school. This was right around the time that the pandemic fully struck. So I left school for spring break in March. I left my classroom and everything with the intent that I was going to be back in school in a week. And as many of you all know, we kind of got that call during spring break where we were putting pretty much, as much of the United States on standstill as possible. And so they said at that point that they were going to be extending spring break for another week, and then after doing that, they were going to evaluate where the schools would be at. So I feel like during that time there was a lot of just like stress and uncertainty, but for the most part I felt really relaxed. I felt normal. I felt very this was spring break. It was an extended spring break. I was embracing that. I was like, yeah, sure, this is great. So I remember just very randomly having an early sign of tenderness in my chest. Very, very minimal, but just a very random sign. And so I decided to take a pregnancy test. Honestly, not expecting at all that I was going to be pregnant. But it was positive. It was one of those pregnancy tests where you have the two lines that make like a cross, and I was like looking at it sideways. At the time my best friend was living with me, and so I called her upstairs and I was like, can you look at this, because I'm pretty sure that I'm seeing things wrong. And she looked at it for like 2 seconds and she was like, yeah, you're pregnant. That says pregnant. So I was like, okay. So I waited for the 3 to 5 minutes for it to develop or whatever, and then I ran downstairs, and my husband was in his mother's room. He was building a table for her. And I was trying to think about all those cute little pregnancy announcement things. And so I opened the door and I looked at him, and he saw that I was super exasperated, and he thought something was wrong. And I couldn't hold it in, and I was like, I'm pregnant. And that was how he and my mother-in-law found out at the same exact time. And it was so funny because my mother-in-law got up and she was hugging me, and she was crying happy tears, and my husband was like, can I hug my wife? So
did he know that you were taking a pregnancy test upstairs?
No,
oh,
no.
wow. So he really had no idea.
So random. I don't even know what, possessed me to do it. It was super random. But so we found out we were pregnant, and I didn't waste any time. I called my parents. I told friends. I told my Aunt Robin, my mom, my dad. I told my brothers. I called them all. I was super excited.
Of course.
There is nothing like the innocence of being pregnant for the first time. before you go through an experience like this, when you're pregnant for the first time, it is complete innocence and just honest and a pure moment. And so, of course, you get so excited and you get wrapped up in the experience of wanting to share with everybody. And so, at the same time, one of my really good friends from school, he had also been recently married. He was trying to get pregnant with his wife. And so I was so excited to share with him because we had been talking about our journeys of trying to get pregnant. And I was so excited to share with him, like, it's finally happening.
It's here for me.
It's happening, yeah. And so, so then your brain just goes, you change completely. You go into this mode of like, okay, there's life inside of me now. I have to change. I have to do everything now for this life. You know, what I eat, what I drink, when I sleep, even lifting boxes and stuff become, am I doing stuff to protect this life? And so it's a huge transition. It's a huge transition on a scientific level because your body is going through all those hormonal changes. Your body's going through the changes of not the kind of the regular cycles that you've been used to, but you know, at the same time, you're just so elated and so happy. You don't even.
Such a joyous moment that, you know, something that you were wanting is like a next step in your relationship, in your marriage, and you were just ready for this new adventure.
Yes, absolutely. And so, at first, school-wise, they made the decision that they were going to pivot schools online. And I just thought that this was an even better opportunity. That now I'm early pregnant. I didn't have to be kind of in school around the pandemic. I could still teach from home, and then at the same time, I would still be able to use the bathroom very frequently, or rest, or hydrate, or take naps and things like that around my school schedule to really care for this baby. And so I feel like in general, I felt like I was so lucky.
Yeah,
you know,
ideal scenario.
Yeah,
you know, get to work from home. You don't have to worry about the interactions with your students, potentially getting sick, causing the baby harm.
Yeah, I mean, I kept telling myself this is the best case scenario for my personal situation. And so you start off after they find out you're pregnant by doing blood work. The blood work measures your HCG levels. So what they want to see is that you go in for your first round of blood work, and then you come back in either like a couple of days later or a week later, and they do blood work again, and they're looking for that growth in HCG levels that confirms you're pregnant. What I appreciated about this is that kind of helps with chemical pregnancies or things like that, or a false positive. When they actually see those HCG levels rising, it's more of a definitive, okay, you are pregnant. Now we are going to start setting up the appointments for the ultrasounds and things like that. So I went in for my first ultrasound. The downside to the pandemic was that I went through my first ultrasound by myself. So my husband was allowed to be on FaceTime or Duo. He was allowed to be on video call, but he wasn't in the room with me. And so that was hard. This is our first baby, my first pregnancy. I had to go through that with just my phone, being like, do you see?
Without that human interaction.
Yeah. So
which is something that you necessarily weren't expecting, right? No one expected these situations to happen.
So we got the ultrasound. At that point in time, I was like 6 weeks pregnant, and the doctor was talking to me about miscarriages, and it was a standard thing with appointments. It's like, you're 6 weeks pregnant, here's all the books and the pamphlets and the information, here's the medicines you can take, here's all this information. And then kind of as like a footnote, it's like, this is miscarriage, this is what it is. Miscarriage is the loss of a pregnancy. It's very common to happen within the first 12 weeks of being pregnant. And so at that point, I was very kind to the doctor, but I was like, I know what miscarriage is. My aunt, who has agreed to let me share a little bit of her story, she miscarried her second child. And I was with her when that miscarriage process had started for her. So I was very aware of miscarriage being a viable thing. And For her, her miscarriage happened around 16 or 17 weeks.
Okay.
So she was actually past the 12-week mark, past what they consider the high risk for miscarriage, and she had still miscarried.
I think that's really important to address as well because, sometimes we think about increments. So thinking about that 12 weeks, okay, I'm safe, but we should really definitely still be careful because, as you mentioned, your aunt was a little bit of a different case from what typically occurs.
Right, yeah. So, and that's the thing too, and like you said, there is this window where we think we get to that 12 weeks and we're safe, but, miscarriage can happen at any point, and then it gets to a certain point where they actually change it from being miscarriage to being stillbirth, where you actually go through the process of giving birth to a baby that's no longer alive because it has developed so much farther. So I was aware of the miscarriage, and I talked to the doctor about it. I understood, but I was like, sometimes in the back of your mind, you still don't fully believe, like, oh, this can happen to me. You're like, yeah, I know, I've heard about it, I know people that have went through it, but you're not like, oh, that's definitely going to happen to me, because you're so caught up in the pregnancy of everything else. And so I told a lot of people that I was pregnant, which is, I guess, a common misconception. People say, oh, you shouldn't talk about your pregnancy until you're past the 12 week. But because I had been around a miscarriage before and experienced it, I actually had specifically said to my husband, if I miscarry, then I would want people to know, because I would want them to be able to support me, versus them never knowing I was pregnant and then never knowing that I lost a baby.
That's really powerful.
And so we had agreed that we would not keep it a secret, and we told people. We talked about it, and we even went as far as to start planning and preparing. We started to sign up for all of those like baby websites, and we started to use coupons to buy diapers, because those are things you could stock up on.
You were prepared. You were preparing for your baby to come and being as prepared as possible, which is definitely your personality. Yeah, you are definitely someone who wants to make sure that everything is checked off in a timely fashion in ahead of time.
Yeah, and so I also feel like in this time where it's so uncontrollable, mothers cling to things that they can control, right? So using a coupon to buy diapers at this point in time was something that I could control, right? I couldn't see the baby. I couldn't feel it at the time, because it's so little. That whole window between 6 weeks and 12 weeks is a crazy time. It's a crazy stressful time where you don't feel it, you don't know it's there. You just have pregnancy symptoms and you hope that everything's going to be okay.
What type of symptoms did you have?
I was very tired. I think I napped pretty much every day for 3 hours. I was nauseous, and I did not have morning sickness, thankfully, but I did have cravings. I craved tacos, every form of tacos.
Really?
Yes, tacos from every restaurant you could imagine, from Taco Bell to Chipotle to Tijuana Flats. I just wanted tacos.
She wanted them all covered.
All the tacos. So, but other than that, I felt like I was very lucky and a very simple, easy pregnancy. And so, because of that, I was never really aware that anything was wrong, because I had symptoms, and the warning signs for miscarriage that I had been aware for was bleeding. That is the warning signs of miscarriage. When you start bleeding, especially heavily, for no reason in a sense, that was the warning sign for miscarriage. That was the warning sign for my aunt's miscarriage. That was the only warning sign that I knew. And I did not have bleeding for 12 weeks. I didn't have anything.
So in your mind, you were safe. You weren't thinking about the possibility of the potential of having a miscarriage, because the only thing that you knew related to miscarriage was the bleeding. You didn't have that.
Right. So 12-week appointment was in June. June 4th was my 12-week appointment, and there was, like you said, no bleeding. I still had all the pregnancy symptoms. At that point, I was already establishing a belly. I actually have the pictures, from 4 weeks, 8 weeks, and I was getting ready to take my 12-week photo. I was getting a belly because every pregnancy is different. So some women start to show a lot sooner, and so I was showing, and so my husband was actually going to be able to come to this appointment, the 12-week appointment, because it's the first big ultrasound you get. And so I was really excited. I had bought him an early Father's Day present that was a shirt saying that he was going to be a dad. I had my shirt on that he bought me that said Pregosaurus Rex, and it was a T-Rex with a pregnant belly, and it was the cutest thing ever, and I was super excited. And so we go to the gynecologist, and we go to the room, and my husband gets called up because he has to wait in the car, so he gets called up into the room, and she has everything all ready. And so because of the pandemic, I had asked her if it was okay to record because my mom, and things like that. And she was getting everything set up, and she said I wouldn't start recording.
How did you feel in that moment?
I instantly knew that something was wrong. I didn't know what was wrong, but I instantly knew something was wrong.
Was it her wording? Was it her tone?
It was definitely her tone. It was her tone and kind of the energy in the room that came after she said those words. You would think that in a moment where you're about to see your baby, for my husband, it would have been the first time for him seeing the baby in person. And then for her to say it the way that she did. And I appreciate her, and I want to make sure that I make that clear. I don't blame her at all. She was trying to protect me from obviously recording a very devastating moment. So I do appreciate her. So I put the phone down, and I kind of remember holding my hands and trying to regulate my breathing as I watched her find my baby on the screen. I could see it, right? It was there, so I didn't understand what it was, and then that's what she said, I can't find a heartbeat. And so my instincts was well, look harder. What do you mean you can't find it? But while my instincts were saying one thing, my heart just kind of knew. Obviously with being in the miscarriage with Robin, my aunt, my heart just kind of knew that this was happening. And I just remember, there's not very much that I remember after that moment, but I remember screaming and crying so loudly that I was, at the time later reflecting on it, I was worried about all those other women that were in the waiting room waiting, wondering what they were thinking of when they were hearing probably me screaming and crying. And my husband, I just remember him.
Was he in the room at this point?
He was.
Okay.
I just remember him, because you figure I'm laying on the bed, he just put his whole body on top of me and just laid on me and held me. And my husband's very protective, and one of the things that he prides himself on is trying to kind of protect me from, he always says I'm a very innocent spirit, so he tries to protect me from the evils or dangers of the world. And I think in that moment he was trying to protect me in the only way he could in that moment.
He was trying to provide a sense of comfort, probably not only for you but for him as well.
And so at the same time too, at that point we stopped looking at the screen. We stopped looking at the baby because she has to keep going. She has to keep trying and get these measurements and things like that. But I experienced what was called a missed miscarriage. And I had no idea, and I'm sure many of your viewers may not even know what that is, but a missed miscarriage is when the baby is no longer surviving, but your body has no idea. It does not recognize that the baby is no longer alive. So your body carries on with the pregnancy as if the baby is still alive and growing and developing. And the only way for you to find out specifically about a miscarriage is when you're in that 12-week-ish doctor's appointment. And that's when they tell you that you're. And it was and still is one of the hardest moments of my entire life. Even with my preparation and understanding of miscarriage, it still completely felt like I had fallen through a trap door, and that there was no way that just earlier today I was making plans to take my pregnancy photos, to announce my pregnancy on Facebook, to now I have to call my friends and family and tell them that my baby is no longer alive. It was incredibly difficult.
How quickly did you decide to inform friends and family after your appointment?
I informed very close people very quickly because my mom and my aunts and some of my friends were aware that I was going to a 12-week appointment, so they knew. So they were kind of waiting.
Expecting some news.
Yeah, they were waiting for the video that I was going to take or the pictures of the ultrasounds. They were waiting for all that stuff. And I remember calling my mom, and I was so embarrassed. I was so ashamed. I was so devastated. I'm like, how am I going to tell my mom that she's no longer going to be a grandma? You know, how do I do that? And how do I tell my friends that I just didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to do it. I felt, like I said, embarrassed, ashamed, and then I felt guilty for them that they were going to have to go through this hardship because I couldn't keep my mouth shut, or I couldn't wait to tell them, and I told them too early. So you really go through all those guilts and those emotions and
A
things.
wide range of emotions. And I think it's really important that you address that you were not only feeling for yourself, but for your loved ones as well.
And I really was. And we had told some really close friends, and they had children that they also told. And I was like, how are they going to tell this to these children? Like, I just felt like the worst human being in the world that that they had to now tell their kids that my baby was going to be going to heaven. And it was tough. It was very tough. But I told my mom, I told my aunt, and things like that. It was a tough day. But the day got even tougher because I was experiencing a miscarriage. I had to medically help my body come to terms that I was no longer pregnant. So the doctors explained to you that there's kind of 3 ways that you can do this. You can wait naturally until your body eventually realizes, and it will go through the miscarriage process on its own. You can take specific medication that are similar to use to end pregnancies. Or you could go through a surgery called a DNC surgery. I did not want to wait naturally because the doctors told me that based on how the baby was measuring, the baby measured at 9 weeks and 3 days. So that meant for between 9 weeks and 3 days to this 12-week mark, I had been carrying a baby that was no longer alive. And so that's a long time already to be carrying a baby that's no longer alive. So I didn't want to wait for my body to naturally go through this process because there is no timeline as to how long it will take for your body to realize. So I could have still continued to be falsely pregnant for another 2 weeks or another 4 weeks, and I did not. It was hard enough as it was to know that it was no longer alive, to have to keep carrying it. I didn't want to go through that. So we opted for the medical, the medicine route, to take the medicine. And so they try to prepare you by saying that it's going to be like a very heavy period.
Not at all.
I feel like that was the biggest misconception I think I've ever been told. My body went through labor. in every sense of the word. It went through a smaller version of labor because I didn't have to dilate as much because at the time that my baby was only about the size of the palm of my hand. So I obviously didn't have to dilate to a full open cervix to push out a full baby, but I went through having essentially my water breaking, which for a miscarriage it's blood. It's a lot of blood. And then going through the kind of hours of having labor pains or contractions as your body is kind of contracting everything and kind of getting ready to push it all out. And then actually going through the process of sitting in my bathroom shower and pushing out my baby. And so I couldn't believe that they had said, and I know from reading other things that a lot of women agree, I couldn't believe that they had said that it was going to be like a heavy period. Because I have been through some crazy periods, and this was not it. This was a form of labor.
What is something you wish you would have known? So obviously the heavy period was not a great explanation, but what is something maybe that would have prepared you more to understand what this process was about to look like?
I wish I would have known about the excruciating pain. Again, not just the emotional and mental pain that you're going through, but the physical pain. I mean, I never had a baby before, so I never knew what labor felt like. But that hurt. It was painful. Some women obviously they react different to medicine. Some women it may not hurt them as much, but for others it may be just cramping. But for me, it was debilitating pain where I couldn't walk. I could barely get out of bed. Nothing was helping. Pain medicines weren't helping. We were trying ice packs, cold packs. Nothing was helping the pain. We finally ended up getting one of those big yoga medicine balls because in the back of my mind I was thinking, sometimes when women are going through labor, they rock on those medicine balls to help them. And when we finally did that, it helped, but I was still in pain. I was still going through.
It alleviated a little bit.
Yeah. And so I would be able to roll out of bed, rock on the medicine ball for this contraction interval, and then get back into the bed. And then, a couple minutes later go through that process again.
During this time period, were you still teaching? Was this still spring break? What did that look like?
It was summer, so it was June. Okay. June 4th was my appointment, so it was all through summer, that this process happened. Thank goodness for that, because I don't know how I would have been able to go back to work. The whole process for my husband and I, from the start of finding out that we had miscarried to finally being 100% healed, took 6 weeks for us.
Wow.
So while I did pass the baby fairly early on in that time frame, we were still dealing with my body holding on to parts of the pregnancy. For dear life, my body was holding on to the point where we ended up doing 2 rounds of medication, and then eventually I still needed to get the surgery, the DNC surgery at the hospital. And so I finally got cleared, 100% healed, had my follow-up with my doctor 6 weeks later from that whole experience.
Wow.
And so, thank goodness I wasn't working. My husband at the time, he was working from home, and he had a really, flexible system and a good support system at work where they were aware of everything that was happening, so he could support me as I needed it. It was tough. It was really tough, and by mid-June, we had finally gotten past the physical part of it all.
So what was next after this? So you were cleared, you had your doctor's appointment, post-surgery.
That's when I think the mental kicked in. because all of my time and energy and emotions at that point were just, get this out, get this taken care of, get healed, get better, go through this surgery. I mean, it was a terrifying thing. It was very scary. Again, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, so going to doctor's appointments most of the time, where I was alone now at this point. The surgery, thankfully, my husband got to be with me for the surgery. But
how long is the surgery? Can you tell us anything about?
The surgery was it was only like 4 or 5 hours in the morning. I went to Winnie Palmer, which is a very hard process to go to the hospital for women and babies and not walk out with a baby. So I never imagined that the first time that I would be approaching Winnie Palmer Hospital for myself would be for a surgery to remove the remnants of what was left of my baby. So it was only about 4 hours. I mean, the doctors and nurses at Winnie Palmer are amazing. My husband got to be there with me until I actually went into the surgery, and then as soon as I kind of came out and came back to, he was with me again. And then you kind of have like a 2-week recovery process, where you need to take it easy, just like you would with any surgery. So, but overall, that process went as smoothly as it could have, because my body had done a lot of the work already. It was a fairly minor surgery compared to some of the other ones that they've had to do.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the mental aspect. So what did that look like specifically for you?
It was definitely going through the 5 stages of grief.
Okay.
It would flip, between like being very angry at myself, being very sad, feeling a lot of guilt. Sometimes I wonder if I've fully made it to the acceptance level.
Okay.
Because I honestly, there are some days where I don't think that I have. It was coming to the realization that it was okay to be sad, and it was okay to hurt. Mentally, I felt very exhausted all the time. My motivation for wanting to do things was very minimal. I remember at the time, like, not even really wanting to clean the house or do things. I was very emotional for other things as well. Like, I remember we were sitting at the table. It was me, my best friend, and my husband, and we were making jokes or whatever, and I said something as a joke, and it kind of offended my best friend, but in a joking way. But I remember breaking down and crying because I wasn't processing any emotions. Like, I was trying to shove it all down and bottle it up, so that, like, one thing where you kind of like joke, offend someone, all of a sudden turned into I'm upstairs in my room just sobbing.
So it sounds like you were avoiding the feelings, and then you had that breaking point where everything just kind of poured out at once.
Yeah, and I think there was a point in time where my husband and I started to talk about the prospect of going to therapy, because I wasn't handling things emotionally. I was very angry. I was very angry at myself. I was very angry about the situation. And I was very angry watching my other friends announce their pregnancies and announce their registries and share in their happiness, and I couldn't understand why was I that one? Why me? Not that I would wish that on my friends. I wouldn't at all. Now I'm at a point where, like, I'm super grateful that I was the one that went through this and not them. But it was a very dark time for me.
Now you're at a stage where you are sharing the joy and happiness of your friends and those who are, experiencing pregnancy and, making those announcements.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the reasons why I agreed to do this video and to talk about this and my story is because I want other women to understand that they are not alone. And I'm so grateful for my Aunt Robin through this journey, for my mom, for my husband, for my friends and family that have supported me through this journey. Um, you know, but specifically for my Aunt Robin, because she went through this, I feel like she was able to offer insight into the emotions that I was feeling. And so when I would say things like, I feel really angry, she was like, that's okay. You can feel like that. That's normal. And just having someone to affirm that, in a sense, like, I wasn't going crazy. Like, I wasn't crazy for loving my baby that I knew for 12 weeks. I wasn't crazy about being emotionally distraught about the fact that I lost my child. It wasn't uncommon to feel a lot of blame on myself, which, as you've said, looking back, I took all the precautions necessary before I got pregnant. I drank lots of water. I exercised. I was fairly healthy, for the most part, getting pregnant. And so at the end of the day, miscarriages are one of those mysteries in science, as the doctors say. We don't know what causes them. We don't know why they happen. They can do some tests sometimes after you pass the baby, but it's not always going to guarantee that there's going to be an answer. And so I guess that's what I'm currently, where I'm currently at right now is I think I'm getting more towards the stage of acceptance and understanding and being okay that when I need to cry, I need to cry. When I need to take a mental health day, I do. My husband has been a great support system of just showering me with love and adoration and support. And, he'll be like, what do you need? You want to go to the beach today? Because he knows that, like, I love the ocean and, like, the ocean's a very relaxing place for me. So he's like, let's go to the beach. You want to go to Disney? Let's go to Disney. You want to sit home and cry? Then let's sit home and cry. And so I honestly can't thank him enough and appreciate him enough, because I know as a father, he went through this miscarriage just as much as I did. But yet his constant ability to put me first, to put me above everything else, even the emotions that he's dealing with, I mean, it just affirms the reason why I married him.
And I want to thank him as well, because I know that when I approached you about talking about the stories, you wanted to talk to him and make sure that your story was said for the two of you, because you are, a married couple and you are one in what we believe. And so thank him also on my behalf for allowing him to not only allow you to share this, but, to speak on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to note too that, like, men go through the miscarriage just like women do. I know it's not fair to say maybe just as much, because my husband, like, understands that I physically pushed out the baby, but the emotional process of the loss, husbands and men go through that just as much as well. And I think that part of breaking the silence of this process for women will also allow more men and more fathers to open up about how they feel at the loss of one of their children.
I think that's really beautiful and important to be said and shared, because mental health as a whole for men is more stigmatized than women, and so that's something that we also want to address and break as well.
Absolutely. So we're in November, right? Almost November now. We're technically in October, but almost November. So I would have been due on December 13th. So I would have been entering kind of my final trimester. And so I think I don't think that's why I've not fully hit the acceptance level yet, because I know that my baby's due date is going to be a big
instrumental part of your understanding, recovery, just
just
realization,
Yeah.
accepting process.
And I think also becoming pregnant again is going to be another instrumental part, as you were saying, about the acceptance and the process. I already know now, as you said, as the type of person who's overly prepared, I already know, and I'm preparing myself that this next pregnancy is going to be hard. It's going to be challenging. We have been trying. We waited kind of the recommended time to heal. So we have started the process of trying again. And so far it has been negatives. And each one of those negative tests, they definitely break your heart in a different way. But I just kind of remain hopeful, and I know that when the process finally does happen and I do become pregnant again, that it is going to be a different ballgame. That innocence that I had told you about at the beginning of the video, the innocence of being pregnant for the first time, will be gone, and the fear and anxiety between not knowing is going to be high. It's going to be very high, and so those are all definitely things that I will need to face when that time comes. But I think being open, talking about my mental health, being able to acknowledge when my mental health is not as strong, especially with my husband, with my friends, with my family, those will be things that will help me get through those processes and hopefully get to a point where I will actually have a baby.
There's two more things that I want to address. There was a term that we had discussed when we first initiated this topic, a rainbow. So I want you to enlighten us a little bit more about that.
So a rainbow baby is what it's called when you have a child after you miscarry, and it's the idea that after every storm, there's a rainbow. So the storm being this process of miscarrying and the loss, and now you've come out on the other end of that storm, you're stronger because of it, and there's this beautiful rainbow. It would eventually be your rainbow baby that is born. So my aunt has had her beautiful rainbow baby, and to this day I really appreciate that she still acknowledges the child that she lost. She has like a dedicated little teddy bear that holds that baby's ashes. And she's acknowledged with her kids that they've had another sibling that has passed away. So I'm hoping that we will have a rainbow baby soon, hopefully within another year.
And I also want to personally thank Robin because I have known her for quite some time as well. Thank you so much for being and allowing Alicia to share part of your story, and God bless you and your family. And I did see her journey as she shared it, and so my heart goes out to you as well.
I think one more thing that I want to kind of leave everyone with too is the term of miscarriage and where the blame goes, right? Because as women, when we miscarry, we usually say it as I miscarried or I had a miscarriage or things like that. And it really kind of puts the blame or the focus on yourself. I miscarried. I must have done something wrong that I lost my baby. That's what we're kind of saying to ourselves under our breath, right? So I noticed that when I had to return to work and return to school, I had to face a lot of people who weren't aware of my situation or what happened. And I found that I started off by saying I had a miscarriage or I miscarried. And I eventually shifted my language to my baby passed away, or my baby did not survive, or I lost my baby. Because I think personally have gotten to the point where I don't blame myself anymore. I understand that I did everything I could to be well for my baby and to give my baby the best possible chance to survive. And for whatever circumstances, it didn't happen. So I don't want to keep that blame feeling anymore. So it's more healing for me when I say things like my baby passed away, because there's no blame in that. There's no blame in somebody passing away. No one is going to be like, oh, that's your fault, or that's the baby's fault, or that's whatever the circumstance's fault. It's not. It's not anybody's fault. As the doctors will say, it just happens. Sometimes there's no rhyme or reason to it. It just happens.
And I think that's really important of the healing process as well, is to not shift that blame to you or to the woman or to any individual. I want to talk about that cute little necklace you're wearing.
Oh yes, thank you. This was a gift from my Aunt Robin. It is an angel, and in the center of the angel is a purple birthstone, and this is the birthstone for June. And this was the month that my baby came into the world. And even though it wasn't alive and we never gave it a name, and because we didn't end up knowing if it was going to be a boy or a girl, we still wanted to honor the baby. And it was part of the healing process to acknowledge and honor the baby. So we have this necklace, and then at home we have this angel. It's actually the angel for women who have lost their babies, and it has a saying about how, I carried that baby for all of its life, and it will remain in my heart forever.
That's beautiful.
So we have it on the shelf next to the angel that's dedicated to my grandma and my grandpa. And for my personal beliefs, I do believe that my baby is in heaven and with my grandma and my grandpa and my loved ones who have passed on. And I believe that there is some sort of strength and some sort of story that comes from all this pain and the loss, and that I will, at the end of it all, when I fully come to terms and accept it, it will have been a process that I needed to go through, for whether myself, for whether I'm sharing my story with some of your viewers that maybe are going through the same thing, and hearing somebody else share their story is really empowering. For my aunt who's been through it, and for anyone in the future who may go through it, to just know that it's okay. Your family and friends will still love you. They will be there to support you. If you want to find support, if you want to talk about it and find help, it's out there, and it's okay. It's okay to ask for help.
Thank you so much, Alicia, for sharing your story. Is there any final words that you would like to share?
I feel like there was, but
That's fine.
Any final words? I think I just want to say thank you again to you, to my husband, to my aunt, to my parents, to my siblings, to my friends, and to everyone who has supported me through this process. Because, it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to face. And I think talking about it and being allowed to talk about it and not being afraid or ashamed of talking about it is what has really helped me do the most healing. Because when you push everything down and you bottle it all up, and that's when the blame comes, and that's when the guilt comes, and that's when the fear comes. But the more you release it and let it out there, that's what's going to help me be more relaxed and healed, and hopefully what will help me, have another child in the future. Hopefully. So.
Well, thank you so much, Alicia, for sharing your personal story. I honestly commend you and appreciate you for just being here with me today, not only sharing it with me, but sharing it in this format. So I really appreciate you and your friendship. Thank you. My chair fell.
I caught you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.